I hiked in 2014, the dry year, and I remember starting in April 24th, and I don't remember any snow up there going over the top.
2014 was definitely one of the drier years, and that remained the case for a couple of years. 2015, I was involved with helping to provide water caches, because even by April, many of our springs had already dried up. I mean, that was a real issue. Less of an issue right now, but there's kind of no in between. It's either dry and there's no snow, and we tend to have issues with water availability, or we have major like snow and ice issues. We seem to swing kind of from one year to back and forth. There's no kind of nice easy middle ground. And obviously, these sorts of years were not unusual back in the 80s and 90s, but there just simply were so few people hiking the PCT back then. And frankly, the folks who were doing it were, probably on average pretty experienced hikers. And that certainly has, made conditions more complicated.
I think you said below 9,000 feet now it's pretty clear of snow.
Yeah.
At this point,
there's very little. There are just a few. There are always a handful of stubborn patches. They're the same spots every year, even whether it's a low snow or high snow year. They still really hold it. They're just certain spots that are under the trees and on north-facing slopes. But apart from those, we're almost completely clear below 9,000 feet. The high point of the actual PCT in these mountains is right around 9,000 feet. At the southern end of what's called the Fuller Ridge Trail. But like I say, most of the hikers, particularly a bit later in the season, like now into May, probably the majority of the hikers actually go up to San Jacinto Peak. I mean, I certainly recommend they do that. It's a spectacular view, and it's a great hike, and it's not a significant, other than the elevation gain in terms of mileage, it's no significant deviation from the PCT. But it does, obviously, because it's a high elevation mountain, it does come with some of its own challenges, and obviously even the snow persists up there, and that can require some different equipment. Yeah,
boy. So there was an increase this year. How many do you think have come through so far? How many PCT hikers that you've counted? Or is there a register? Or
there is a register at the terminus at Campo. The southern terminus on the Mexico border. We are more than, in terms of proportion, we're more than halfway through the Pacific Crest Trail season, and the number of permits for northbound hikers issued, I think, was something like 6,000. So I would guess we're kind of at close to, probably getting close to like 4,000 having come through, or certainly on the trail in the area. I mean, every day that I go up the mountain and I descend one of the feeder trails that comes into the PCT, I'm passing, like yesterday, I passed 20, I think it was about 25 PCTers as I descended. Most days typically have been 30 plus, and that's just in the couple of hours that I'm descending. That's not for the whole day. So you get an idea at this time of year, between certainly, peak season, kind of April, May, on the trail in the 60 miles of the San Jacintos at any one time, there could easily be 200 or 300 hikers. I mean, it's in the hundreds. It's not in the single digits or the dozens.
Wow. So, how do you see Mount Baden-Powell? I mean, is that doable right now? And also, how do you see the Sierras? A lot of people are going to not attempt those this year. What do you see?
Right. So Mount Baden-Powell. Well, first thing I would say is both of those are, those are not, the San Jacintos is my real area of expertise. So what I'm saying is just really about other locations is kind of broad brush. And that said, I mean, I've hiked a lot in the Sierra. We lived in Sacramento for years, and I used to hike in the Central Sierra a lot. And before that, we lived in the southernmost Cascades at Lassen National Park, Lassen National Forest. which is kind of the midpoint of the PCT. So that said, in general, Mount Baden-Powell is basically their snow situation tends to be very comparable to ours. So if we have a challenging year, they have a challenging year. If we're dry, they're dry. It's not a perfect correlation, but 9 times out of 10, that's kind of how it works. So the feedback I've been getting is that Mount Baden-Powell's kind of comparable to how we are right now. So it's passable. It's not particularly challenging. By the time, if folks are getting through here without, say, microspikes, without some kind of additional traction, then by the time they get to Baden-Powell in another 2 or 3 weeks' time, they'll be able to get through there without too much trouble. As for the Sierra, well, I mean, it's certainly no worse than it was in 2017. And people who got there at the right time, which is obviously a bit later in the season, were generally able to get through. So people, in general, my experience is not to worry too much about snow. I'd be a lot more concerned about river crossings. That's, when we had in 2017, we did have one snow-related fatality here in the San Jacintos, but the 2 fatalities in the Sierra were both in relation to river crossings, people getting washed away on river crossings. And, when you have a high snowpack, and then again, because the climate's changing up there as much as it is here, the snowmelt tends to be even more rapid and more dramatic than it was in the past. And so river crossings become super dangerous. So, I mean, in the case of the 2 fatalities in 2017, they were petite individuals who try to do crossings on their own. And that's a big mistake. Obviously, doing it with a group, doing it in an organized way, having a rope, having some kind of system, those sorts of things are really important. But especially for petite individuals, trying to go across on their own is not a good idea. So that's kind of how I see the Sierra. I mean, in my experience, snow depth per se is not a problem. Sometimes we get 6 feet of snow up here, and it can be the easiest. It's super easy travel. You're just cruising along the top of really nice compacted snow. Whereas I can see, 6 inches or a foot, if it's really icy, that can be way more dangerous. So the depth in of itself is not the issue. It's just kind of how it's distributed. And like I say, I often warn hikers who ask me about snow in the Sierra that I'd be a lot more concerned about the river crossings. I'd worry about the water a lot more than the snow. So that's my take on that. But yeah, lots of people got through in 2017 without too much trouble, and so this year should be no different. 2014,
we had, as far as I know, 2 fatalities. One was just a fellow in the beginning, just the first 16 miles, he got heat stroke because he was doing ecstasy, the drug, the night before, right, and he didn't bring enough water. And then there was a flash flood in Oregon, so some fellow got swept away with that. That's all I know of. And then I was just, before I'm going to have Claudia and Tim come in more, but just wanted to suggest that if you are concerned about the environment, we certainly are, you might consider the testing, of a private lab of, like I say, the snow, soil samples, because the people in Shasta around there, they're really into this, Northern California up there.
Yep.
They're seeing what the aerosol spraying has been doing to the trees, that it's really, the fires are hotter because of the aluminum in the soil and on the trees, and there's a lot going on ecologically with that. So just a suggestion you might consider.
No, that's a great point. Yeah, I made a little note to myself that I need to go and talk to some of the agencies and find out if anyone's. I mean, I'm pretty confident no one is doing something like that, because I would know about it if it was. But yeah, we're a perfect test case because, like I say, we're this super prominent mountain that kind of thrusts up well above all of the surrounding areas, and we're right in major flight paths for basically all of the major airports for Southern California, which are obviously some of the busiest. So So no, I will look into that, and I'll ask some questions and carry that forward. That's good advice.
Okay, be careful. Okay, Tim, Claudia, do you have anything still?
Well, I was just curious. Do you see any disappearing of persons on the trails?
The San Jacinto Mountains actually have kind of a bit of a what's the way to put it? A mysterious history and reputation for people disappearing. In fact, there's a hiking colleague of mine. She used to be actually a National Park Service ranger who's actually working on a book along that theme of. But we currently have 2 active cases for hikers who've disappeared and never been seen since. One's from 2017, actually a Pacific Crest Trail hiker from Ireland by the name of David O'Sullivan. I've been one of the coordinators of his case, and he's still missing. And unfortunately, we presume that did not end well. That the available evidence, such as it is, suggests that. And we had another day hiker go missing actually in January, which is another case that I've been involved with. And yeah, the San Jacinto Mountains has got a long history. There was a very famous case from 2005, another Pacific Crest Trail hiker, actually a very experienced Pacific Crest Trail hiker who'd done the Appalachian Trail, guy by the name of John Donovan, and that was the subject of a kind of a famous article that appeared in Backpacker magazine. Who he disappeared in a May snowstorm. We always get 1 or 2 snowstorms in May, even in the driest years. We'll still get a kind of an out of the blue snowstorm in May. He was here in 2005, which was actually a pretty heavy snow year. But we had a May snowstorm and he disappeared. He wasn't located until his body wasn't located for another year, completely on the opposite side of the mountain, basically entirely just kind of a bizarre series of events that I won't go into detail, but you can find it online, the John Donovan case. And so, yeah, the San Jacintos have a kind of mysterious history. Some of that's sort of wrapped up in some of the Native American folklore as well. The mountain that overlooks Idyllwild, the rock that's famous for, particularly with rock climbers, is called Tahquitz Rock and Tahquitz Peak. And the Kawiya believe that Tahquitz was a shaman, a good shaman who became a bad shaman, and a lot of the disappearances in the area are connected to that history. And yeah, so the San Jacinto Range has a long and storied history of disappearances, and that continues to this day.
Well, as a novice, so many people out walking around, I was wondering, they don't appear to be afraid of anything. They can take the trail and go for it. Do you see that normally among hikers? Is that they're not overwhelmed with caution, but they do go out and explore. And is that normal? Is that natural?
I think
the way it is?
That is the way it is, and I think that's one of the dangers of the Southern California mountains, because they're so close to huge centers of population. I mean, within a 3-hour drive of the San Jacinto Mountains, we've probably got about 20 million people. So it's almost kind of too easy to just drive from wherever you are in LA or San Diego, or there are dozens of other cities in the area, and suddenly be in some actually pretty challenging mountain wilderness. And it does always amaze me that we actually don't have more rescues and more disappearances. And at first I sort of wondered why that was, and I I think it's actually because most people kind of a fairly sensible kind of survival instincts kick in. I mean, I'm coming down the trail and I can tell the weather's deteriorating badly, and I've got, all the gear and a bunch of survival equipment, and there's somebody drifting up the trail in, a t-shirt and shorts and not even carrying a bottle of water, and I'm sort of thinking, man, that's going to turn into a rescue. And like I say, 99% of the time it doesn't. And that's probably because people get partway up the trail and then they're like, you know what, this is probably not a good idea. But you're right. I mean, there isn't perhaps enough caution, and that's hopefully where something like the San Jacinto Trail Report comes in. Is it provides that extra piece of information. It's like, you know what, this people think it's. I think yeah, like I say, it's Southern California. People figure how dangerous can it be. And I often cite the example I cite now is on New Year's Day up here, we had a really a pretty vigorous storm, and I recorded every time I go up to the peak, I record the weather with a handheld device, and I had recorded my lowest wind chill temperature I'd ever had up here of negative 33 Fahrenheit. It's about minus 36 centigrade. And that's a lethal temperature. That's nothing to be messed around with. And people just are almost in disbelief when I explain that that's what the weather can do up here. And it might be in Southern California, and everyone might think it's all kind of beach and desert, but trust me, there's deadly mountains up here, and that's part of what I'm doing is making people aware of that. I don't want to scare people away. I want them to come up. I'm happy to have them come up, and I think that's a great thing. Obviously, the more people we can get out into the environment, the better. But do it safely. Know what you're going into. Don't just think, hey, this is only 2 hours from home. How dangerous can it be? Because it's not as simple as that.
Well, enjoy and be safe, and thank you.